How's it going, everybody? Welcome to my latest video. Sticking to the same topic that I usually stick to. Tonight's topic is on horror, as if that's any surprise. A little something a little different for us tonight. I'm gonna go back to a classic, further than Halloween and The Shining. We're going back to the '60s for a horror film, and in particular, more of a suspense/thriller. Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho. That's going to be the film I'm discussing tonight. Why Psycho? Well, it is a classic. It's kind of one of the horror films one of the many staples that started it all, really. And I am wearing my Psycho shirt. Thanks to the guys over at T Villain. I have many of their shirts. This is one of many. So tonight I'm going to be discussing the film Psycho. I say the film because I'm mostly going to be talking about the film, but I have also read the novel. I read it recently, as a few months ago, beginning of the year. And the fun fact about the film and the novel is they're very similar. Some of the names are changed and some of the descriptions are a little different of the characters, but other than that, both of them are pretty much, the same storyline wise. You do get a little more detail in certain aspects in the book, and I will discuss that when I get to such a scene. Without further ado, discussing the film Psycho. I could easily discuss this without referring to my phone, but we're going to go over this. I'm going to treat this just as a mystery unsolved video. So I'm going to go over the basics, and then when I read a certain section, I will then give you my thoughts. Also, I can't remember Psycho scene for scene. I probably could conjure up most of it for you, but I want to make this fun and informative. And it won't be informative if I'm just taking the film from the top of my head, right? All right. Psycho is a 1960 American horror film produced and directed by Alfred Hitchcock. The screenplay, written by Joseph Stefano, was based on the 1959 novel of the same name by Robert Bloch. The film stars Anthony Perkins, Janet Leigh, Vera Miles, John Gavin, and Martin Balsam. The plot centers on the encounter between on-the-run embezzler Marion Crane, played by Janet Leigh, and the shy motel proprietor Norman Bates, played by Anthony Perkins, and its aftermath, in which private investigator Balsam, Marion's lover Sam Loomis, Gavin, and her sister Leela, played by Vera Miles, investigate her disappearance. One thing about Psycho is, just from that description, you think to yourself, that seems pretty cut and dry, right? It's pretty straightforward. Little noirish, right? It is easily Alfred Hitchcock's biggest hit. And that's not my opinion. That's a fact, right? It is worth noting. I always like telling you the budget that it took to make movies, and then how much it made at the box office. In 1960, we're talking, what are we talking here, right? The budget to make the film was $806,947. That's literally $200,000 under 1 million, or 10,000. Yeah, under a million, right? Yeah, pretty sure. I suck at math. It made 50 million at the box office. So hold on. saw something on my screen. It was annoying me. It made $50 million at the box office, which for 1960, that must have been astounding. Like 50 million now, and like Marvel Marvel films, it takes like 50 million to make. So for 1960, for a film, for a suspense thriller horror film to do that, that did stuff that Halloween, Friday the 13th, Nightmare on Elm Street, and Texas Chainsaw Massacre probably only dreamed of, right? Psycho was seen as a departure from Hitchcock's previous film, North by Northwest, 1959, as it was filmed on a small budget in black and white by his crew of his television series, Alfred Hitchcock Presents. I do watch a lot of Alfred Hitchcock Presents from time to time. It's on Freevee. If you want to check it out, check out. If you have Freevee, um, absolutely check out Alfred Hitchcock Presents. The twists are sometimes very dull, but sometimes they're very clever. It's hit or miss for me. Also, North by Northwest. I've never seen the film, but it's on Tubi, and it's the only Alfred Hitchcock film that any app, and I have like 7 apps on my television. North by Northwest is the only Alfred Hitchcock film they have, that any of them have. When fun fact, when Peacock first got started, when NBC first, created Peacock, there was an Alfred Hitchcock section. It had like 5 or 6 films. Peacock, what happened to that? Bring that back. I will watch the god of that. All right. Initially, the film divided critics due to its controversial subject matter, but audience, oh my audience, Jesus, Justin, but audience interest and outstanding box office returns prompted a major critical reevaluation. Psycho was nominated for 4 Academy Awards, including Best Director for Hitchcock and Best Supporting Actress for Lee. Witness, if you will, a time, 1960, where a horror film, which was probably scarce at the time because, I imagine Alfred Hitchcock probably rolled this puppy out under, again, thriller or suspense. Because if he rolled that out as a horror and it got 4 Academy Awards, Justin, what are you talking about? Just stop beating around the bush. God damn it! Why don't horror films still get nominated for Academy Awards, Golden Globes? Why doesn't it happen? And even if they do, they don't win. Psycho is now considered one of Hitchcock's best films, and is arguably his most famous and influential film. See? It has been hailed as a major work of cinematic art by international film critics and scholars who praise its slick direction, tense atmosphere, impressive camera work, memorable score, and iconic performances. It is regarded as the most heavily analyzed film in the long career of the most investigated director in the history of American film, and often ranked among the greatest films of all time. It set a new level of acceptability for violence, deviant behavior, and sexuality in American films, and has been considered to be one of the earliest examples of the slasher film genre. One of the earliest examples. I'm sure there's others out there around that time, but not like Psycho. After Hitchcock's death in 1980, Universal Pictures produced follow-ups, 3 sequels, a remake, a made-for-television spin-off, and a television series. In 1992, the Library of Congress deemed the film culturally, historically, and aesthetically significant and selected it for preservation in the United States National Film Registry. So, 2 things I would like to know before we start breaking down the film. Alfred Hitchcock was known for the violence, deviant behavior, but also sexuality. He would put very subtle hints of sexuality throughout his films. Not just I've seen like maybe 3 or 4 Hitchcock films, so I'm not one to talk, but in Psycho, it's not laid on thick, but again, it's very subtle. It's like, like when the shower scene. Is it meant to be sexual? Well, it's a woman in a shower naked, so obviously. But at the time, you have to think, oh my God, like, oh, they're showing a woman in the shower. Or the way that she has her conversation with Norman. Or the conversation between Norman and his mother. Like, there's a lot of, like, connotations in there where you can kind of take it one way, or you can kind of take it sexual, which you're not wrong for thinking because that was likely intended by Alfred Hitchcock. So there is that. Also, I do remember saying this in another video. Alfred Hitchcock had a type. He liked to cast blonde women. Janet Leigh for this, Tippi Hedren for The Birds, Grace Kelly for To Catch a Thief. Those are just 3 off the top of my head. There's probably a ton more. North by Northwest, I think, has, hold on. I think that's also Grace Kelly, if I'm not mistaken. Oh, Eva Marie Saint, I apologize. Also probably blonde. So, yeah, he had a type. I don't blame him for that type. All right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over the plot. If you haven't seen Psycho, don't watch this video. If you don't want to be spoiled for a film that's over 60 years old. Otherwise, do keep watching. I will stop at times so that I can break down my thoughts on it. I will also come right out and say it. The reason I'm also discussing this, the reason it says discussing and not analyzing, is because I'm going to go back and forth. I love this film, obviously. But I do have a serious gripe with it, to the point where I actually wrote a blog post years ago that's still on my website, oddly enough. I might have to touch that up and dust off the digital dust. But I do have a gripe with it, and I made a blog post about it. And basically, when I get to the scene, I will stop and I will tell you, this is what I made my blog post on. I will use those exact words. This is what I made my blog post on. Without further ado, let us discuss. Marion Crane, a real estate secretary in Phoenix, steals $40,000 in cash, equivalent to $425,152 in 2024. From her employer after hearing her boyfriend, Sam Loomis, complain that his debts are delaying their marriage. So, one thing I never really noticed about this film, go back and watch it. I don't know if anyone else has ever picked up on this, but the relationship between Marion Crane and Sam Loomis is one of the most bizarre relationships I've ever seen in a film. That's the first time I've ever uttered those words. But and I remember the last time I had watched Psycho was a little bit after I had read the book. And their relationship in the book is pretty much the same, but again, there's a little more detail. But that's just it. You expect there to be like a lot more details, a lot more a better connection in their relationship in the book, but it's still as straightforward in the book as it is in the novel. It's just very vanilla. Like, basically, like, it was almost like a catfish. Like, they had met maybe like once or twice before. I don't know. It's really weird. They had met once or twice before, and they talked on the phone, and I guess what she saw the relationship as, Sam Loomis didn't. She sets off to drive to Sam's house in the town of Fairvale, California, switching cars in Bakersfield after an encounter with a suspicious policeman. That scene when she's driving the car is like she sees her boss, but does she see her boss? And then the cop pulls her over, and then she buys the car. Like again, like I've seen the film over a dozen times, but only recently that I watched it that I saw that scene, and I was like, God, this is kind of awkward. Like I get why she's doing it because she looks suspicious as hell, but it's like, lady, could you draw any more suspicion to yourself? A heavy rainstorm forces Marion to stop at the Bates Motel, just a few miles from Fairvale. Norman Bates, the proprietor, whose Second Empire-style house overlooks the motel, registers Marion, who uses an alias, and invites her to dinner with him in the motel's office. When Norman returns to his house to retrieve the food, Marion overhears him arguing with his mother about his desire to dine with Marion. After he returns, he discusses his hobby as a taxidermist. His mother's, quotation marks, illness, and how people have a private trap they want to escape. When Marion suggests that Norman should have his mother institutionalized, he becomes greatly offended and insists that she's harmless. Marion decides to drive back to Phoenix in the morning to return the stolen money. Does she now? Again, seen this 12 times, like over 12 times, and each time maybe I just forget the fact that, yeah, maybe I just forget that part where she grows a conscience in a cheap motel. I am going to return the money. I don't know why I did that voice. um, as she showers, a shadowy figure enters the bathroom and stabs her to death. Shortly afterward, Norman comes to check on Marion, only to discover her dead body. Horrified, he hardly cleans up the murder scene. He then places Marion's body, her belongings, and unbeknownst to him, the hidden cash in her car, before sinking the vehicle in a swamp. One of the things that always gets me is so first off, the shower scene, probably one of the most iconic scenes in the history of film, cinema, movies, whatever you want to call it. We all know it. The e e e e e e. I'm not going to do the sound. Yeah. In fact, and you can see in the corner there it is, right there. So I just did the sound, right? You know it. The minute you hear it, you know what it is, right? You don't even have to see the scene. If that music comes on, you know it's Psycho. The thing that I always know is how afterwards he comes to check on her, only to discover her body. Now, any normal person is going to be horrified, and he is. But he doesn't call the cops. But why? I'm not spoiling anything. We know why he doesn't call the cops. But again, at the time, it's almost like, well, I imagine when this film first came out, or people are watching it for the first time, they're like, why the hell isn't he calling the cops? Why is he covering this up? He didn't do it because it was a woman that did it, but did he know the woman that did it? Like, what's going on? So that's like the first like big question mark, that small little thing that I always have when I watch it, right? Marion's sister Leela arrives in Fairvale a week later, tells Sam about the theft, and demands information about Marion's whereabouts. One thing I absolutely cannot fucking stand about this film is Marion's sister Leela. Can't fucking stand her. I said I wasn't going to swear, but sorry. Vera Miles plays a great, nagging, sisterly bitch in this film. The things that she tries to put together and says, oh my God, I think something's happening. Oh my God, something's wrong. Oh my God, we should look into that. It's based off of nothing. She pulls this shit out of thin air. This is my first number one gripe about Psycho. Leela, the sister of Marion. She pulls her theories and ideas that something happened to Marion out of nothing. Because she's, on one end, she's like, oh, my sister would never do that. My sister would never do this. But then she comes up with these crazy theories and she said, we need to look into this. It's like, you just said your sister isn't like that, yet you're also sitting here like, well, we need to look into this crazy theory. Based off of what? Meanwhile, when she meets Sam, this is a little perplexing. In the movie, she goes to see Sam, and Sam is so caught off guard. He thinks it's Marion, even though he wasn't supposed to meet her or whatever. He wasn't expecting her. And she introduces herself, and she's all frantic and stuff. And again, it's been few months since I've seen the film, but if I remember correctly, he's very nonchalant. Like, not that he doesn't care, but I don't know if this is because the actor is just not a good actor, but hey, your fiance might be missing. Oh my God, what? Like, it's just like, it's almost like a guy that acts in a half-ass Lifetime movie, right? Like, you think it's there, but it's not quite there, right? It doesn't materialize fully. Like, he acts surprised, but it's like, but do you care? He denies knowing anything about Marion's disappearance. A private investigator named Arbogast, played by Martin Bassam, approaches them, stating that he has been hired to retrieve the money. He stops at the Bates Motel and questions Norman, whose nervous conduct, stuttering, and inconsistent answers arouse his suspicion. Number two gripe with the film, and this is what my blog post is about. We have reached that part of the video. Back in the day, I wrote a blog post about this film. In particular, it was going against the film. It was negative. This is the scene that I pick apart, as I find the scene to be very, what's the word I'm looking for? Very lacking. Like, I'll break this down for you. Whose nervous conduct, stuttering, and inconsistent answers arouse his suspicion. Absolutely, if someone is presenting nervous conduct, stuttering, and inconsistent answers, that's absolutely true. The problem that I have is Arbogast baits him. No pun intended there, right? He kind of coerces him. I'll use that instead of Bates because, yeah. But he coerces him, and it's almost like he forces him. It's typical police interrogation, right? He coerces him into giving him what he wants to hear. In my opinion, Norman doesn't really display anything more nervous than a typical nervous person who's being asked questions. So the questions that are being presented to him are told like over and over, but he's being asked the same question just in a different way. So when Norman changes his answer, or he's, stuttering, the answers are a little different, but that's because, of course you're going to be nervous because a guy just randomly shows up and starts interrogating you. You're not used to it. So naturally you're going to be like, you're going to give different answers. That always bothered me because he's also like one of the guys that, like, he's the first one, he's looking into it. Well, he's the second because his sister. But like, he's supposed to be professional. And he's like, oh, I got a lot out of this Bates fella. And it's like, no, you didn't. Like, you coerced him into telling you what you wanted to hear. So I break that down in my blog post from a few years back. One of my big gripes, right? When Arbogast infers that Norman, hold on, he examines the guest register and discovers from her handwriting that Marion spent a night in the motel. When Arbogast infers from Norman that Marion had spoken to his mother, he asks to speak to her, but Norman refuses to allow it. After Arbogast enters the Bates house to search for Norman's mother, a shadowy figure assaults him at the top of the stairs and stabs him to death. Slight gripe with this one. So, I forget how the mother comes up, but again, he's pushing the narrative here, and it's almost like it's borderline bullying. He's like, "Oh, I insist on talking to your mother since Marion talked to her," because I think Norman slips up and says that, "Oh, well, mother talked to her and it was fine." "Oh, you have a mother? She's up there?" And of course, if he hears that, he's going to want to talk to her, and he does, and he gets what he deserves, which is the classic line of him when he's falling down the stairs. Like, you've never seen a person fall down like when someone falls down the stairs, they're either hitting maybe like a couple steps, like in the middle, and their body's bouncing, or they're rolling off of each step. As someone who fell down the stairs as a child, I can vouch I was the person that hit the two middle steps, bounced, and then fell to the bottom. I didn't roll. Arbogast doesn't do that. He does his tiptoes in the only fashion ever. It falls down the stairs. When Sam and Leela do not hear back from Arbogast, Sam goes to the motel to look for him. He spots a silhouette in the house who he assumes is Norman's mother. Leela and Sam alert the local sheriff, Al Chambers, who tells them Norman's mother died in a murder. Suicide by strychnine poisoning a decade earlier. This one, I'm finally going to refer to the book. This one's good because I don't particularly remember the film part, but in the book, I assume it's, like I said, it's mostly the same. Sam tells the sheriff. Well, at this point, Leela's like screaming, like, "Oh my God, we need to bring the authorities into it." So Sam goes, "Well, I know the sheriff. I'll run it by him." So he mentions Norman. So the sheriff calls Norman, and Norman, of course, gives him a clear-cut story, like, "Oh, nobody was there." Nobody was there. Leela doesn't know the sheriff. She barely knows Sam. Sam can vouch for the sheriff. The problem here is that's not good enough for Leela. That's why I don't like Leela. That's why I think she's a bitch. Because she pulls these ideas and theories out of thin air. Even after being told by Sam, who knows the sheriff, well, he said that there was nobody at the motel. Well, she must have stayed there. She must have. Like, where are you getting this from? So of course, it then ends up going to the whole like, "Oh, we saw Norman's mother." Wait, what? You didn't? That's impossible. Because she died from strychnine poisoning a decade earlier. Chambers suggests that Arbogast lied to Sam and Leela so he could pursue Marion and the money. That's solid. We like that. That makes sense. That's Justin approved. Convinced that something unusual happened to Arbogast, Leela and Sam drive to the motel. Well, that's right. Arbogast had called from the motel, so that's how they knew to go there. But again, Leela's insistence, based off of very little, if anything at all, just grinds my gears, to quote Peter Griffin. Where did I leave off? Sam distracts Norman in the office while Leela sneaks into the Bates house. Suspicious, Norman knocks Sam unconscious. As he heads to the house, Leela hides in the food cellar where she discovers the mummified body of Norman's mother. Second iconic scene of The Shining, in my opinion, of Psycho, in my opinion. There's even a GIF on it on social media. It's when she slowly pushes the rocking chair. Well, not the rocking chair, just like a regular chair, and the mummified corpse is just there, and she gasps. Leela screams in horror, And Norman, wearing woman's clothes and a wig, enters the cellar and attempts to stab her. Sam appears and subdues him. Let's go back to the 60s for a second, right? You see the mummy. Okay, so imagine you're at the theater, you're watching Psycho for the first time. And it's in black and white, it's 1960. You're enjoying the film at this point. It's something you've never seen the likes of before. And to this point, you've been somewhat like, you haven't really been scared, right? So, Leela pulls the chair back, and of course, there's the mummified corpse of Norman's mother. That scares the crap out of you. But then something happens, again, for 1960, that I imagine must have had people shrieking louder than when they saw the mummified corpse, which was Norman dressed as an old woman in woman's attire with a knife in his hand, ready to attack and kill Leela. I imagine a lot of people were shocked, bewildered, confused as all hell. Why is he dressed in women's clothing? What? He really is a psycho. At the police station, a psychiatrist explains that Norman killed his mother and her lover 10 years prior out of jealousy. Unable to bear the guilt, he mummified his mother's corpse and treated it as if she were still alive. How many people in 1960 could even come up, actually, no, Robert Bloch came up with that idea, right? So Robert Bloch, the guy who wrote Psycho, kind of makes you wonder, what was in that man's mind to come up with a plot like that? Unable to bear the guilt, he mummifies his mother's corpse and treated it as if she were still alive. He recreated his mother as an alternate personality, as jealous and possessive toward Norman as he felt about his mother. Whenever Norman is attracted to a woman, mother takes over. Under the mother personality, Norman killed 2 women before he killed Marion and Arbogast. Did he now? Again, over 12 times I've seen this damn film. I must have missed that part. He killed 2. I did not know that. And I read the damn book. I guess it's one of those things that it's just kind of like, it's just there because you're just reading or you're just watching and you're hearing it, but it just kind of, it went through one ear and out the other. And I read it, but didn't really read it. The psychiatrist concludes that mother has now submerged Norman's personality. Norman sits in a jail cell and hears his mother's voice stating that the murders were his doing. Meanwhile, Marion's car, which contains her remains and the stolen money, is retrieved from the swamp. I always remember the 2 things at the end of the film. Well, there's 3 things. The first thing is they're like, Leela and Sam, when they find out that Marion stole the money, and they had to convince Leela, yes, your sister stole the freaking money. She isn't who you thought she was, right? They thought that, he killed her for the money. And it's like, no, he never knew she had the money. The fact that gets put in there, I'm not sure if that's in the book, I don't remember. But it's in the film, and I was just I always kind of shake my head to that. How would that even have come up? They had a very small conversation, right? The second thing, the whole mother persona that Norman has in the film. Somebody asks one of the police officers. They make him look dumb as hell when he asks, what is he, a transvestite? And it's first of all, I'm not sure. I wasn't even aware that term existed in the 50s and 60s. 2, for you to even come to that conclusion, at that time, crazy, at least to me. The third thing is they don't mention the iconic scene where Norman's just sitting there staring into the camera, and Mother's talking in his head, and then the fly kind of like lands on him, and he goes, "I won't even do that. That's what they'll know. I couldn't even hurt a fly." Like, that's kind of iconic, that part too. Okay, so we discussed and went over the film. I told you what I wrote the blog post on. I told you my 2 gripes with it. For good measure, is there a third gripe? I'm sure there is. It was in there somewhere. I just didn't define it. I will now compare. So the book. In the book, it's her name's not Marion. I think it's Mary. It's kind of bland, yeah. Why they changed it to Marion, I guess it sounded better. I'll give you the things that are different. Norman is probably the biggest difference from the film and the book. In the film, played by Anthony Perkins, Norman Bates, of course, as we know, is a skinny young man in his, I want to say, mid to late 20s. Yes, no? Black hair, shy, obviously, weird, kind of creepy persona. In the book, he's actually middle-aged, so he's like 40, and he's overweight. So he's like a fat, bald 40-year-old man in the book. I'm not kidding. I remember reading the description of Norman in the book and just being like, huh, well, that's a difference. But even reading the description, I'm still picturing Anthony Perkins as Norman Bates in my head. So it's like, you can describe him all you want, but I'm picturing. Also, he wore glasses in the book. I don't think he wore glasses in the film. So there was that part. Arbogast, pretty straightforward book and film. Although, I will say the scene that I can't stand in the film, in the book, he's a lot more, I think, thorough. Like, his questions make sense in the way that Norman reacts. Doesn't lead up to like a questionable follow-up to where he's like, oh, that's kind of weird. Why are you doing that? Why would you say that and then say something else totally different? He doesn't do that in the book. It's pretty straightforward, which I like. So again, in the film, we all know, spoiler alert, 60-year spoiler, the covering up of Norman's mother is done excellently, right? In the book, it's also done good because it's done a little different, right? In the film, we see the silhouette. We hear the voice. Obviously, for the book, the only thing you can see is dialogue. And we get dialogue. It's really good dialogue. Because remember what they said when when he likes a woman, how the mother persona takes over. So I do remember there's a couple scenes where Norman mentions a girl, not even Marion. This is before Marion shows up, right? He's like upstairs in the house and he's talking about a woman, and Mrs. Bates just kind of berates him. And it really puts you into the scene. It really makes you think that the mother's actually there. Obviously, I already knew that wasn't the case, but I imagine for anybody who's never seen the film or even never watched the film or read the book, it would convince you that she was actually in there when she actually wasn't. And there's a couple other scenes that are like that, and they really sell you on the point of like, oh, like Mrs. Bates is like totally controlling over Norman. That's crazy. And it's like, we know it's not true. There is one thing at the beginning of this video that I addressed that I read that I would like to address now, because Psycho, the first one, the first Psycho, is iconic. It is excellent. It is a classic. I say this about every film that um, is the first of its kind, right? I said it about the first Halloween. I said it about the first Friday the 13th, Texas Chainsaw Massacre. I said it about The Shining because Doctor Sleep sucks. But now we're going to address the elephant in the room. Psycho 2, Psycho 3, and apparently there's a Psycho 4, God help us all. Okay, here's what bothered me when I just found something. I learned something new today upon reading this, right? When I get to the damn. All right. After Hitchcock's death in 1980, Universal Pictures produced follow-ups, 3 sequels, a remake, okay. Here's my problem. Did Robert Bloch write God, why am I stuttering? Did he write a sequel to Psycho? No, I don't think he did. The sequel is based off of the movie, and even though that they're both one and the same, I don't believe that he wrote a second one. I could be totally wrong here. I'm gonna look it up. Just if I remember correctly, when I type in Psycho 2, it'll come up. But I think it was only because they had decided we're gonna make a Psycho 2 film, and Bloch was like, oh, well then I should probably write a book. I'm probably going to correct myself here. No, that is not true. Hold on. 59 to 1990. Okay. So, yeah, if I remember correctly here, Robert Bloch wrote the sequel to Psycho because they were deciding to make the film first. That's what kind of bothered me, because I always wondered, like, well, wait a minute. Psycho 2's garbage. The third one's even worse. Would Hitchcock really have signed off on that? Forgetting when Hitchcock died in 1980, 2 years later, Psycho 2 was made. But then I'm thinking, well, they'd have to consult the writer, not the director. So naturally, I would think that if Hitchcock were still alive in 82, he probably wouldn't have made Psycho 2. But because Robert Bloch wrote it, they probably got his consent on it. So you didn't need Hitchcock's, right? Psycho 2. I'm not going to break that down. God no. My problem with Psycho 2 is I think Vera Miles is still kicking as Leela, and she brings her daughter into it. And I guess Norman gets out of the psychiatric ward, and they end up baiting him in. Coercing. I hate using the damn pun. They coerce him into, like, thinking that his mother's still alive, and I just don't like it. It's just, the funny thing is, I had recently watched a documentary about sequels that don't suck. Actually, it was Eli Roth's History of Horror. If you haven't seen that, definitely check it out. And one of the topics was sequels that don't suck. And they're like, Psycho 2 was actually a really good sequel. And I'm like, excuse me? Like, I've seen the film like twice. The first time I watched it, because I was like, oh, there's a Psycho 2? Me afterwards, oh, there's a Psycho 2 and it's not good. And then, like, the second time I ever watched it was just because, out of spite, because I was like, maybe I was wrong about this. I wasn't. It was crap. So the fact that they're like, Psycho 2 is probably one of the greatest sequels ever made, I'm like, are you people on drugs? It's not good. I'm not even gonna satisfy the curiosity by watching it a third time. It's one of those films that if it's on, maybe I'll watch it just to pique my curiosity. But other than that, I ain't going to search for it. Psycho 3, can't tell you what that's about. Don't even freaking remember. Uh, 3 sequels. Yeah, Psycho 4. Somebody told me there was a Psycho 4, and I didn't believe them. So Psycho 2 was made in 1983. 3 was made in 86. Uh, Bates Motel, 1987. What is that? Film. A made-for-television super horror film and a spin-off of the Psycho franchise. Oh. This is the only installment to not feature Anthony Perkins as Norman Bates. That's really weird. I didn't even... It is a direct sequel to Psycho, ignoring the other films. Oh, it's one of those. Oh, I hate those. I hate films that ignore other films. Halloween did it, and I picked that shit apart, did I not? I did. Psycho 4, The Beginning, 1990. God help me. Maybe I did watch that. I don't even remember. It was his final role. It was Anthony Perkins' final role until he died in 1992. And then Psycho in 1998, where Vince Vaughn plays Norman Bates, and the late Anne Heche plays Marion Crane. Never seen that one though. And then there's a series, Bates Motel, with Freddie Highmore, I think. Am I wrong? No, Freddie Highmore and Vera Farmiga. For someone who's never watched it, and I know the actors who played in it, kudos to me. So yeah, basically, in a nutshell, the first, like we said, greatest film of all time. I have my issues with it though. Second one, we don't talk about it. It's like Fight Club, you know? You don't talk about it. Third one, you don't talk about it, right? I didn't even know there was a fourth. That's awful. Maybe that's bad on my part. Maybe, I don't know. I'm going to stick to the classic. Thank you very much. Maybe at some point I'll check out Bates Motel. I heard it was good. And yeah, this has been my discussion of the film Psycho by Alfred Hitchcock, and written, of course, in book form by Robert Bloch. I do hope you enjoyed this video. To the one person that's watching this, thank you very much. Much appreciated. I don't get many people watching my videos, so anytime I get at least one, I am a happy person. Do stay tuned at some point soon. I want to say maybe tomorrow. I'm free tomorrow for my next video, and I can tell you what it is because I have my phone here. Trusty. You think I'd remember, but I don't because my memory sucks. For no reason at all. For no reason at all. Oh, yeah, we're going to do that. My next video will be analyzing the Terrifier franchise. And if you know me, you know my thoughts on Terrifier. And if you don't, you're in for a real fucking treat. Until next time, have a good one.